Welcome to Kids Recall. In today's video, we'll be going through the 2015 superhero movie, Ant-Man. It's time to recall. Let's get started. Turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. The movie starts and we see Hank Pym, who is a physicist and an entomologist. He used to work for an organization called SHIELD. Hank Pym conducted research on changing the size of living things, even humans. It could enhance the size and weight. He came up with particles that could make something big or small. He named them Pym particles. He manufactured a suit using these particles, and by wearing that suit, anyone could become as small as an ant, but they would still be as powerful as they are. He also created a device through which all kinds of ants could be taken under control. And because of his research revolving around ants and having created the aforementioned suit, he got the name Ant-Man. Hank's wife, Janet, was also an agent of SHIELD, and he also created a suit for her, and she was known as the Wasp. Hank and his wife, Janet, used to work on different missions assigned by SHIELD. When they were on a mission in 1987, when Russia launched a nuclear missile towards America, Hank and Janet were sent to deactivate the missile. When they got there, they found it unable to enter the missile, and Hank said that in order to be able to enter it, they were going to have to make themselves smaller than even an atom. His belt, however, was too damaged, but Janet's was fine. So she made her size even smaller and made her way inside. She was able to defuse the bomb, but she got stuck in there. Since then, she was stuck in the quantum realm. The suit was not designed for her to make her way back out of that realm. Hank, however, was positive that he would be able to get his wife out of there, so he didn't stop trying. Hank and Janet even had a daughter, and Hank told his daughter that her mother got killed in a plane crash. Hank put his daughter into a boarding school so that he was able to study the quantum realm. Hope then started thinking that her father didn't love her, and he also hid the truth behind her mother's death from Hope, which is why she started to hate her father. It all happened 2 years ago, and now it's 1989, and Hank Pym resigns from SHIELD after realizing that Howard Stark has been trying to replicate his shrinking technology. Hank thinks that his Pym particles are a very crucial thing, and they could be used for good purposes, but the world is full of bad people, and they are going to use it in a negative way, which is going to be a really dangerous thing for humanity. After leaving SHIELD, Hank starts his own company that he names Pym Technologies, but he keeps his formula away from even his own company. After a few years, Hank's own daughter becomes the CEO of the company, and a man named Darren Cross is Hank's assistant. He has been really close to the man, so Hank has started to like him by now. Darren has not had success at shrinking living tissue, but on the other hand, we see Scott Lang has just served his last day at San Quentin State Prison. Waiting to pick him up is his old cellmate Lewis, who offers to let him stay at his apartment. Hank, on the other hand, gets invited to a presentation at the company. Darren shows Hank a prototype of his yellow jacket suit, modeled after the Ant-Man suit that Hank wore. Hank sees that Darren is about to be able to produce something close to what he had created, and he knows that Darren is not a good man and he has ambitions, so it could be dangerous for humanity. Darren has named this technology the Yellow Jacket. That is what he has named his own suit, which is inspired by the suit worn by Hank. His daughter tells him that she trusts Darren, and that he should just give his Ant-Man costume to him. But Hank tells her that he has already found a man for that. The scene then changes to Scott, who is at the birthday party of his daughter. It, however, doesn't turn out to be a good idea to go to that party, as his ex-wife and her husband go on to insult him and kick him out of there. His ex-wife Maggie tells him that he's a criminal and she's not going to let her daughter Cassie meet him. She tells Scott that his daughter thinks he's a hero and she doesn't want her daughter to know the truth. She also tells him that he has to find a legitimate job and pay off his delinquent child support before she'll allow visitation with Cassie. Jim and his partner Gail insist that Scott leave the party after saying goodbye to Cassie, and on top of that, Scott is unable to find a legitimate job with his criminal record. He had found out that the company he worked for had been overcharging their customers, so he hacked into the system and transferred millions of dollars back to those customers. Lewis introduced him to Dave, a getaway driver, and Kurt, an identity theft specialist. Lewis has a tip about a robbery they could do together. Scott realizes that it'll be more than a year before he can see Cassie again if he takes a minimum wage job. So he takes up Lewis on his offer. Lewis's cousin Ernesto has a friend, Emily, who was a housekeeper and was dating Ernesto's friend Carlos. She told Carlos that the man whose house she was cleaning had a giant safe that was sure to be holding valuables. Scott agrees to help them with the robbery. Lewis picks up supplies for the break-in, and Kurt steals a communication technician's uniform. That night, Kurt climbs up a pole outside Hank's house and blocks the electrical circuit, cutting off all phone communication. Scott climbs the fence and takes out the window sensors, then pries open a window and heads to the basement. He unlocks the basement door only to find a second door that is fingerprint-coated. Using tape, he lifts Hank's prints and opens the door. When he gets to the safe, he realizes that he'll need some ingenuity to break the steel door. He drills small holes around the lock, then squirts in water and uses nitrogen to freeze it. The frozen water warps the steel and causes the bolts to shoot out. When he opens the safe, the only thing inside is a weird-looking bodysuit and a helmet. He grabs that and heads out. Meanwhile, Hank has been watching the whole episode upstairs. In the meantime, back at PimTech, Hope and Darren are trying to shrink sheep to microscopic size. Their experiment fails and the sheep is killed. Darren insists they press forward with another sheep. Back at the robbery scene, dejected at not having gotten anything valuable, the group heads back to Lewis's apartment. Scott goes into the bathroom and examines the suit he stole, wondering why it's so heavily guarded. He notices tubes full of red and blue liquid. Out of curiosity, he puts it on and steps into the bathtub to get a better look at himself in the mirror. Noticing a red button on the glove, he pushes it and instantly shrinks, becoming a half-inch tall. Lewis comes into the bathroom and he turns on the water in the tub, which is like a tidal wave for tiny Scott. He hears a voice coming from an earpiece in the helmet. He tries pushing a blue button to return to normal size, but it's broken. Panicked, he jumps away from the water and finds himself sailing across the room. He lands in a crack and falls through to the apartment below. In that room, there's a party going on, and Scott realizes he's on a record player. With the needle moving towards him, he jumps free and lands on the floor where people are dancing. Avoiding the giant footsteps, he gets under the door and into the hallway, where he promptly gets sucked up into a vacuum cleaner. When the dust bag gets emptied, he jumps out again, this time landing on a raft. He runs away but lands on a mousetrap. When it's triggered, it sends him flying out through a window and into the rainy night. He sees raindrops as big as his head before landing on a car. The impact brings back the blue button free, and he grows back to normal size. Scott races home and takes off the suit. Realizing that someone has been tracking him all along, he decides to return the suit to Hank's safe. He easily breaks into the house again and puts the suit back, but when he gets out, he's surrounded by cops. He's arrested and brought to prison, where Paxton is waiting for him. Gail tells Paxton that Scott's lawyer is there. Confused, Scott goes to see the lawyer that he hadn't asked for and doesn't know. He goes to the meeting room, and the supposed lawyer turns out to be none other than Hank. He gives him a choice. He tells Scott that if he takes the suit and accepts the job given to him by Hank, he'll make sure that Scott gets out of jail, or he could spend another valuable year of his life in prison. Hank goes on to tell Scott that he's taken part in no robbery. It was actually planned by Hank himself. He, however, tells him that he made a bad choice when he came back to return the suit, as this is something Hank didn't want him to do. Scott is then taken back to his cell as he tries to process what just happened to him. An army of ants brings him back to the suit. He puts it on and shrinks, and then quickly escapes from prison. One of Hank's ants spreads its wings, and Scott climbs on and flies over the city. He falls down and goes unconscious, and when he wakes up, he finds himself in a bed in Hank's house, where he is being watched by Hope and Hank's ants. He goes out and gets to see Hank, who tells him that he's been keeping an eye on him ever since he stole the money from the Vista Corporation, despite it being heavily guarded. He then takes him to his lab. Hank tells Scott that he invented the suit, but was afraid it would be misused, so he locked it away. Darren had found out about the shrinking technology, but when Hank wouldn't give it to him, Darren forced Hank out of PimTech. When Hope realized how dangerous Darren was, she teamed up with Hank to stop him. He also tells him that he loved him like a son, and he wanted to give him a lot, but Darren turned out to be a greedy person. And when Hank tried to stop him from being a bad guy, he, along with his daughter, kicked him out of the very company he himself founded. Hank tells Scott that he needs to become Ant-Man to stop people like Darren. Scott realizes that he has a chance to become a true hero, the kind of father his daughter deserved. Hank goes on to tell him that he's going to have to go to PimTech and steal the yellow jacket. Another thing he's going to have to do while he's there is to remove all the records of the formula so that Darren is never able to reproduce it. Meanwhile, Darren Cross finally has success at shrinking a lamb. Hope sees this and she's worried for humanity. She tells Hank that they do not have enough time and that she's going to do the job herself, but Hank doesn't want her to do this. She gets upset and leaves the room. Hank tells him that there was a time that Hope used to look at him as her hero, but now she has nothing but hate in her heart for Hank. He tells him that he's going to have to do something heroic if he wants this to happen between him and his own daughter, Cassie, and Scott agrees with him. Scott gets trained in martial arts and how to lead the ant colonies. He practices his timing with shrinking and growing back. Hank tells him that one piece of technology he'll need to steal the suit from Darren is in an abandoned shield building. When Scott flies to the building, he sees that it's the current Avengers headquarters. Pressing forward, Scott lands on the roof, triggering a sensor. Sam Wilson arrives to investigate, and we see Scott, even at a small size. A battle ensues, with Scott going inside Falcon's jetpack and causing it to short out. Scott escapes with the equipment he needs, and Scott gets back, and Hank explains the truth about how Hope's mother died. There was an ICBM that had been launched at the U.S., and Hank was trying to stop it, but even at ant size, he couldn't get inside. She had a similar suit called the Wasp. She decided to shrink to subatomic size and was able to stop the missile, but she couldn't return from that size and was lost in the quantum realm. Darren, on the other hand, envisions himself taking over PIM Tech. He invites Hank to the grand unveiling, then calls Hope and tells her that he has increased security, including covering all the vents with microscopic mesh. They realize the job will be harder than they thought, and they'll need more people. Lewis, Kurt, and Dave are brought in. Lewis poses as a security guard and lowers the water pressure so Scott can get in through the pipes. The man goes on to plant explosives throughout the building, but when he tries to steal the suit, he gets caught in a glass cage by Darren, who has anticipated the burglary. Darren plans to sell the technology to Hydra. Scott breaks free and takes out the Hydra agents. Darren gets into a chopper on the roof and escapes just before the building blows up. Hank and Hope break out by turning a tiny tank to full size and ride it out of the side of the building. Darren puts on a yellow jacket suit and he and Scott fight inside the helicopter. After they both fall out, Scott's able to trap Darren inside a bug zapper. But Jim Paxton, Darren's ex-wife's boyfriend, shows up to arrest him before he can destroy the suit. Darren goes to Jim and Cassie's house and threatens their lives, hoping to draw Scott in. Scott arrives and they fight. The only way Scott can get inside Darren's suit is to shrink to subatomic size, and he causes Darren to shrink into nothing. Scott is trapped in the quantum realm, but hearing Cassie's voice, he manages to rewire the suit, reversing the process and returning to normal size. Following the battle, a grateful Paxton covers for Scott so he won't have to go back to prison. Hank questions Scott as to how he got out of subatomic space and wonders if Janet could have gotten out too. He then catches Scott and Hope in the middle of a kiss. Scott plays it off, but Hank knows what's up. Scott rejoins his friends to hear Lewis tell him about another tip for another job. Falcon is looking for someone with a special set of skills, and Lewis knew just who to ask. In the mid-credits scene, Hank brings Hope down to his lab. There he presents her with a prototype Wasp suit that he and Janet decided should go to Hope. Hope smiles and says, "It's about damn time." In the after-credits scene, Falcon joins Steve Rogers in a dark room where he finds Bucky Barnes. Cap doesn't want to tell Tony about this, and Falcon says he knows a guy. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.